So much of the information that's coming out of the Ukraine-Russia situation is just blatant propaganda. I talked about this before, but both sides are engaged in this propaganda as to be expected. But you can see the lengths that the people in the West are willing to all go to parrot exactly what the establishment's telling us. I don't know what's going on over there. I don't favor Russia invading. I hate these invasions, whether it's the United States, whether it's Russia. I think it's terrible. I don't want people to be harmed. I think the country of the Ukraine deserves to have its own leadership. I think it's a shame that they've basically been a proxy conflict between the United States and Russia since they were created in the 90s anyways. However, one of the things we see is the rapidness that people want to accuse you of spreading Russian disinformation if you want to talk about anything that they think goes against the establishment narrative. They say you're a stooge of Putin and things like that. One of the things that people were talking about way back on February 24th, which seems like eons ago when Russia first invaded, was the potential that they were targeting biolabs that were supported by the United States and Ukraine. People said that this was Russian disinformation and that Russia had been spreading this since 2018. I went to vaunted left-wing fact-checker / propagandist Snopes to see what they said about this. They claimed that this was not only Russian disinformation that's been spread since 2018, but that it's been picking up. And the idea that there are biolabs there that are being funded by the United States and doing anything nefarious is ridiculous. They actually cited out one person, whose name I'll pick below, I believe it's War Clandestine, who was someone on Twitter that talked about this possibility. Now, I don't think Clandestine was 100% accurate in everything he said. He could be, he could not be, I don't know. But it seems that his channel was removed, and Snopes, certainly around this time, targeted him for spreading this alleged Russian disinformation. I don't know if one has to do with the other, but I wouldn't be surprised if that had something to do with why this Twitter channel was canceled. Anyways, we looked at that and said, it's Russian disinformation, and that was the end of it. Now, what about that was Russian disinformation? Well, this is how this sort of thing goes. It could be that some of that's not proven true, and so therefore you could say, well, that's not true, so it must be Russian disinformation. But maybe huge parts of what was being said was true. But the feeling you got from listening to Snopes, USA Today, and other places fact check and say that this wasn't accurate was that there's no biolabs in Ukraine, and certainly the United States had nothing to do with them, and there'd be no reason for Russia to be targeting them anyways. Now fast forward today to Under Secretary of State Victoria Nuland. You might remember Nuland. She's a person who was basically instrumental in a color revolution or a sort of coup, soft coup, that occurred in Ukraine in 2014, where she's on audio admitting that her role as part of the Obama State Department was picking out who the new leader of Ukraine should be after they helped oust Yanukovych, who was seen as the pro-Russian president. Wouldn't it be nice for the people of Ukraine to have a president that looked after their own interests first instead of Russia or the United States? But I digress. Anyways, that's maybe where you would remember her name from. She was testifying in front of the Senate and Marco Rubio today, and she did in fact mention that there are biolabs in Ukraine, and that it appears that Russia seems to be targeting them, and that the United States is actively working with the government of Ukraine to be able to help defend or see what they could do about Russia not exploiting those bioweapon labs. She also said if there's a bio attack, Marco Rubio cued her to saying this. She assures us it wouldn't be Ukraine, it would absolutely be Russia that did that. Now, there's two things to say about this. The first is kind of the reason for doing the video, which is, I thought this was all Russian disinformation. They'll gaslight you and say, oh, no, we were saying it was disinformation, that the initial attack was targeted against these facilities, but it was always a possibility that Russia would go after these facilities. That's not the impression they gave. If we had serious media people, you wouldn't have to rely on people like random Twitter people to get stories like this and questions like this, because the media should be investigating these sorts of things. But we don't have a media. We have propagandists that are just interested in putting out about Sam Hyde shooting down airplanes in Ukraine as the ghost of Kiev, or Snake Island and the people that died there, etc. It's all propaganda all the time. And it's always been like this. Remember, Russia disinformation was used right before the election when they said the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation and censored people from being able to talk about it. And then we found out months later, actually that story was accurate. Remember, they told us 50 intel agents wrote on and said, oh my goodness, this is all Russian disinformation. And then it turned out that was a lie. But it doesn't matter because, oh well, the election's over. They got what they wanted. The same thing's true here. They'll just say that you're spreading Russian disinformation, and when it comes to light, they just act like they never said it and said, yeah, okay, but still trust us on everything. So that's the first thing. And we're seeing this becoming more emboldened and more dangerous as they continue to try to push us closer to a conflict with the nuclear-armed superpower and possible World War III. We hear Republicans and Democrats talking about no-fly zones. We hear people like Lindsey Graham talking about wanting someone to assassinate Putin. All of this stuff's occurring. The other thing I want to say real quick is that I'll post the link below where Russia and China have been accusing for a long time now the United States of developing bioweapons on their borders in places like Ukraine. Now, I can't prove that's happening. I don't know. But how would the United States feel if a hostile power, say North Korea, China, Russia, had biolabs stationed 50 miles off of the border of the United States and Mexico? And it's not just that this is happening in a vacuum. Remember, the United States, we keep talking about sovereignty. Remember, the United States had boots on the ground in Syria. One of the first things the Biden administration did when it came into office was bomb Syria. Not because Syria did anything, but because allegedly Iranians were in Syria attacking U.S. interests, and so we had to bomb the sovereign nation of Syria to take out these Iranians, who simultaneously we were working with to have a deal with the Iran nuclear deal. Make sense yet? Just like we're against Russia in Ukraine, but working with Russia to get an Iranian nuclear deal done. Starting to make sense yet? If not, start to think about how it's not about what they're telling you, and it's all about their agenda to harm the middle class and drag us into another war for their own benefit. That's what's really going on, and then it starts to make sense. So how would the United States feel if these labs were there? I'm not saying these labs were bioweapon facilities or not. It's not for me to say. But I am saying it would be reasonable, with all of the things that are going, with Russia seeing NATO and the United States and Ukraine as being aggressors to them, to be very skeptical of having admitted biolabs, and I'll put the links below, that have some of the most deadliest diseases known to mankind and pathogens, according to U.S. State Department, to have that 50 miles away from your border under the control of a hostile power. Now, I'm not saying this justifies Putin invading or that this was the sole reason of the invasion, but we need to understand that there were things that NATO, the United States, Ukraine was doing that would be seen as aggression towards Russia. And if we just have this simplistic view, we make the same mistake that Ron Paul was warning us about over a decade ago. You don't say we don't blame the people that committed 9/11. You say we could blame them and the blame should be on them, but we could also say, what did we do that led to this? What did the United States do? What did NATO do that led to this? And instead we're childishly dragging ourselves closer to World War III by saying that anyone who asks questions like that is an ally of Vladimir Putin. It's ridiculous, and we should stop doing it. And furthermore, we should stop accepting when people try to accuse you of being a racist, of being a Russian disinformation, etc. anytime you're saying something that later ends up being accurate just because they don't want to deal with it. Hey, if you like this video, please give me a like and subscribe. Check me out on allamericansavageshow.com. I'll be putting this video there and writing articles about that. That's going to be coming pretty much every Monday, Wednesday, Friday around 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much, everyone, and as always, have a good one.